I am joined today by Damian Lucas. Welcome.
Hello, Emma. I'm really excited and I have been looking forward to this podcast. I've been watching a few of your podcasts and actually it's a privilege to be on yours. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Very nice to hear. When you sort of think back to, I don't know, perhaps your earliest memories about thinking about your career and what you thought you were going to do with your life, did marketing and I guess the creative pursuits always kind of feature quite highly in that? Did you always know you wanted to go in that direction?
Not really. I think I've always been creative. Always one of those, students that love painting and drawing at school, particularly in year 10 and 11 and 12. And I did want to kind of be a graphic designer. So I suppose early on, I was probably wanting to commercialize that artistic skill. But yeah, didn't really go into that particular endeavor. I actually found myself not really in marketing, but really in technical sales in the beginning. So, and then from technical sales, which was in B2B, I found myself as a product manager. So that was one of my first kind of stints in marketing and actually understanding how to take a product to market. How do you launch a product? How you release a product, and then also long sales cycles with products, taking products to market. And then the evolution of that for me was actually moving into segment manager. So being more about a group of products to a particular customer segment from a B2B perspective. So it gave me a pretty commercial grounding early on, but I found myself wanting to shift from the product side to something more strategic and creative because I had that burning desire of that creativity, but I still wanted it to be a bit commercial. So I think that's where marketing kind of really came in for me. So as a mature age student, I did my Masters of Marketing at Monash, which is a bit of a leap of faith. And then halfway through that course, because I was in B2B, I was doing lots of B2B, appropriate, I suppose, subjects in my units. I actually got retrenched and then found myself going, well, what am I going to do now? And then I managed to land a job at Kmart. And then I managed to flip all my subjects that I had remaining to be more B2C focused, which was great. So I kind of had my B2B and B2C kind of split in half across my masters. But yeah, that was really supposed to be a pivotal moment for me. And landing at Kmart, it's probably where I started to really discover my love for B2C. I became obsessed with consumer behavior, how people make decisions, what influences them, timing, creative offers, how you all kind of bring it all together. And retail kind of felt like a playground of testing ideas for me. It's like, I loved it. Every campaign was like a mini experiment for me.
Yeah.
What worked, what didn't, how can we do it better next time? So it kind of gave me a really, really good grounding from a B2C perspective and really got me hooked on consumer behavior.
People
But yeah,
are
since then,
infinitely
yeah,
fascinating, aren't they?
and when you're in retail, I mean, you live week to week. Yeah, you live Monday to Sunday. That's your retail week, and you live and die by that week. And what did you do last week versus what did you do last month? And it's really interesting. You feel like you actually are doing like mini experiments every week. Like, oh, we won this week. Oh, no, we lost this week. Oh, actually, we're okay this week. We're still fighting, or we're actually getting that incremental growth and that incremental gains that we are actually trying to aim for each time. And then can we be smart enough and refine what we have within campaign to actually correct that campaign if we're off course? So yeah, I like it. I like the creativity, but I also like the data aspect of it as well, and actually measuring what you're doing and how you can get better at it.
And the immediacy of
Yeah,
that, like to have that, as you said, that
yeah,
weekly feedback of we're on the right track or we're not on the right track. It's kind of rare. Trying to think of other industries outside of retail. I'm sure there are some. They're not immediately coming to mind that are that immediate.
mm. Yeah. Right. I think we just hit the nail on the head there, Emma. It is actually, it's very quick. I mean, it's you either live and die in retail and enjoy it because it's like an adrenaline rush, or you don't. And there are many that I've worked with who've kind of thought retail would be great and then jump out of it. I've always stayed in it. At the moment, I'm not in retail, but I'm still doing some consulting in and around it. I'm actually in real estate doing consulting at the moment. So it's a bit of a nice change, but the pace of retail, it is something that you actually kind of miss when you're not in that pace. You've got to think on your feet. You've got to be very, very, very adaptive to what's happening in the market, what's happening in your business, what's happening with competitors. So, but yeah, you're right. The immediacy of that is something that you can quite get addicted to. And it was much slower when I was in B2B sales and marketing. So longer
Yeah.
sales cycles. So
Yeah.
yeah. So look, from a retail perspective, then I've kind of worked in senior marketing roles across Coles, Bunnings, The Good Guys, Autobarn, Midas, Clark Rubber, and then more recently at 40 Winks. And I've worked across, so from, from those types of retailers, we're talking about big box retailers, franchise, e-commerce. Most of the senior leadership roles that I've had as well, e-com was part of my remit. So I had the full remit. So it's kind of interesting when you have those types of remits that you're seen as a cost center when you're doing all your other marketing, and when you're actually doing the e-com part, you're actually seen as a revenue center. So it's really interesting. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey and an interesting blend of mix of different businesses, different business models, I suppose, and different types of products and ranges and categories and customers. But I suppose the thing that's always stayed true to me is that the skills our core skills are always transferable. And it's given me a very good general base of everything to do with marketing. So it has a bit of a slant, obviously, retail, e-com, I suppose direct to consumer. I can apply that skill set to as well as omni-channel. How do you get in-store and online working together? And that's a bit of a trick that I've actually learned over the journey too. But these days I work as a fractional CMO and under the name of like Lucas Growth Advisory. And I help brands fix what's actually not working for them. I find what is, and then I actually help them scale in a way that's sustainable and profitable for them. I make it sound very simple there, but it's not that simple. There's a lot of auditing, there's a lot of looking at things and actually really scaling things back to the bare basics and the bare bones and find out what actually is working, because not everything can be measured. So let's work out what we can measure down to what is working, and then start scaling back up from there. But that's kind of my kind of simple mentality that I take with that, and actually has been giving me some great results and great tractions with the clients that I've actually been working with. So a couple of direct-to-consumer clients and also some retail clients of mine.
I love the simplicity of that messaging. I think like a lot of things, we can all be guilty of overcomplicating sometimes and trying to, I guess, sell a message of, I can change the world, but there's something actually very reassuring about, I'll help you fix what isn't working. And I actually, love the simplicity of that. But as you say, there's obviously a lot of complexity behind it, and a lot of experience and data and real world knowledge that's gone into that. I'm really interested to dig into that in a little bit more detail. But before we do, I just wanted to go back to e-commerce and just talk a little bit more specifically around how e-commerce has changed over the last, probably 10, 15 years. I've been in Melbourne 13 and a half years now, and I can remember really clearly being in London, Googling Melbourne-based businesses to see where I'd be able to buy furniture and, what my life was going to look like, and found it really hard because there was almost nothing online. And in comparison to, London's a huge global city, but the UK more broadly, there just didn't seem to be that much happening in the e-commerce space. And then I arrived in, 2011? And that seemed to be reflective of kind of what was happening on the ground. But since that time, it has obviously changed immeasurably. But from your perspective, I guess, kind of on the inside of that, what have you noticed about that kind of journey, as it were, towards e-commerce?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting journey, and what you've described is exactly how I suppose us in Australia we're feeling as well. Is that retail was so strong. When you were talking about when you're about to move out here and you're looking to see if you could find some e-commerce solutions or some online store solutions, it was very small and not very well done. The US was way streaks ahead, and a large percentage of, if I talk about from a retail perspective, percentage of sales from e-com, and the UK was kind of neck and neck with them. And I know Australian businesses were actually not necessarily looking to the US; they were looking to the lessons to be learned from the UK. And a lot of English or people from Europe were actually coming out to Australia for that exact reason, is that they actually had done the hard yards. They've scanned their knees and elbows. They've kind of worked out what did work, and they were kind of on the bleeding edge of e-commerce. Australians were so hooked on catalogs. I don't know if you noticed that when you first came here, but that there was from a retail perspective, you didn't have a weekly or a bi-weekly or a monthly catalog. You lost really, because it was the battle for the letterbox. So it was very old school, but only old school in the sense of that it was so effective. Which a lot of people, particularly a lot of people that come from the US or Europe at the time that came over, and I know I was working at Coles at the time, well, what are you going to scrap this catalog thing? What do you do that for? It's very expensive. but highly effective. So
Yeah.
it took a long time for businesses to really embrace e-commerce and make it be part of a part of their business, and see it as not only their best store, but like a best group of stores combined together, and actually really start to understand the customer's start and restart their journey,
Mm.
whether it's actually physical or digital or a combination of the two. So I think COVID was only really where
Yeah.
businesses that actually had either really managed to make sure that they'd gone up to that particular benchmark, or if they didn't, work scrambled and invested to really be in that particular place. But the other flip side of that is that consumers, and the majority of consumers, were not comfortable. I mean, if you read in many of the lots of e-commerce reports around Australia and comfort levels around that, and actually, I suppose, penetration of e-commerce
Mm.
from shopping, it was actually low compared to other countries. So I think COVID really forced that to
Yeah.
come to head, but also really forced the laggards that were behind and actually had that e-commerce experience to come to head as well. But yeah, it was a very slow evolution from an Australian business's perspective. There's obviously some sweethearts that did it really well, did it very early, which made them stand out from the pack very, very quickly. But in general, it was a retailer thing and it was a consumer thing. Things
Yeah.
were too good and they didn't really need to lean into e-commerce, which created a whole heap of nightmares for retailers, depending
Mm.
on what you sold, because the tyranny of distance in Australia is trying to get
Yes.
product across the country. It's very, very expensive and causes a lot of headaches, and then causes customer complaints and issues as well. So
Mm.
it's other headaches that they didn't want to necessarily invest in. I remember when I was at Bunnings that e-commerce was something that they wanted to steer away from for quite some time.
Yeah.
And they actually had some very good relationships in Europe and the US, and were steering away from it for that very, very reason of logistics. They did use digital very well,
Mm.
did use the website very well, did use product pages very well and to describe and videos, but actually selling online, they resisted it to the point where they couldn't resist it anymore. So, yeah, interesting journey to go on. But yeah, I think Australians have actually definitely caught up from a retail perspective, but also consumer perspective as well.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to kind of watch all that from the sidelines, and as a consumer kind of see how it's changed. I remember when Amazon first came here and I was so excited because, my memory of Amazon, certainly living in central London and Prime, was I could order in the morning and it would come in the afternoon. It
Mm.
was, I mean, again, central London, I get it. It's a slightly extreme example, but it was just so good. And even stuff like, I don't know, washing powder was cheaper on Amazon than it was in the supermarket. So, and it was so easy to kind of have delivered. So it did really change how you shopped
Mm.
and how you bought things. And I remember when it first came here, and certainly the opening experience was not like that. And actually, I had stopped using it for years, and I only just recently bought something from them again and noticed that now they actually have their own delivery drivers. It's their own delivery service that they've moved to, which was really interesting and actually pretty smart. I can understand why they wanted to have control over that very important aspect of the customer experience. But yeah, such a difference from where they started.
Yeah, I remember when they first came to Australia, everyone was quite scared. You either went with them or you went against them, I suppose. And that's
Mm,
you kind of saw this divide happening.
yeah,
Like, we're going to compete against them, or we're going to just going to join them. And I was at Autobahn at the time, and we're going to go, well, what are we going to do? We're going to compete with them. We're not going to compete with them. No. But we need to be aware of what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then be part of them. So we're at eBay as a marketplace at the time. So
mm,
it was kind of a natural progression for us to be on there, but they didn't have the scale. So that they
no,
started very small. They obviously set up warehouses in, I suppose, huge population areas first, Melbourne and Sydney, and then started to get their presence. But they're probably where what you experienced in the UK back when you were there at their best. They're at their best here now.
yeah,
So I'm a bit like you. I get quite busy and get quite distracted about doing things. Go, oh, I need that. Okay, if I order it right now, it'll come tonight, or
yeah,
it'll come tomorrow. And then the convenience factor comes into it as well, as much as the pricing. So um, it's in Australian retail, you need to actually stand for something. Yeah, so you don't necessarily need to compete with all these people. You can actually work with these
mm,
marketplaces. It just really needs to be right for the brand and I suppose the consumer experience.
yeah. And I think you see more and more. or certainly how I use it is very much an integrated in-store and online. I do both. Like certainly if it's a brand I've never ordered from, I'll go in
Mm.
store, I'll try it on. And then if they haven't got the right size or they haven't got the right color, then I just order it online. I don't bother going to another store. But it's that sort of integration of the two that I think is a little bit more challenging. But probably, I imagine there are many consumers like me who want that sort of integrated approach. They want both.
Yeah, look, there is. I mean, there's a lot of stats I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but there's some huge stats around the viability and the lifetime value of omni-channel customers, which is
Yeah,
what you're saying you are,
yeah,
which I am as well. I need to experience a brand physically in a store, particularly when around certain products and services.
yeah.
So some things that are more high involvement, or things that I need to make sure I've got the right size from a clothing perspective, or fit from a shoe perspective. But once I've made that connection, then I can go to the convenience
Mm,
of e-commerce, and I can either buy from them directly, or I can buy them from a marketplace. I feel much comfortable and much at ease at doing that. Um, but the omni-channel customers far outpace those pure online customers
mm,
or those pure in-store customers. And that's really where I think retail needs to blend and go to, not be omni-channel, but to really be completely, what would you say, you completely integrated in such a way so a customer
mm.
can shop whenever they want. It's completely seamless from that perspective. They don't see the brand as the online brand or
Yeah.
the in-store brand, or I'm doing a mixed purchase. It's just I have an experience with a brand. I might
Mm.
start my journey somewhere, and I might end that journey somewhere else. So yeah.
You can understand the challenges there for certainly marketers specifically, but also Australian retailers more broadly. And as you said before, that the boom of COVID certainly from an online perspective, and since then, probably a more challenging environment for many retailers. What have you kind of seen recently in terms of I guess a vibe check for for retail more broadly?
A vibe check for retail more broadly. I think I mean, particularly if I'm if I'm talking about working with retailers themselves,
Hmm.
it's interesting. It's you would feel it too. Working in the field that you feel it in, and I feel it on the other side of the fence when I'm coming to people you to get some work. Is that the marketplace is stressed? It's difficult.
Mm.
There's a lot of consumer confidence that is kind of quite wavering at the moment. There's a lot of business confidence that's wavering at the moment. So the traffic is really kind of up and down. It's whether it's on the website or actually in store. You can feel it when you're watching businesses kind of market to you and talk to you, whether it's the amount of emails that you get in your inbox,
Yeah.
or whether it's the amount of things that you see come up in your feed and when you're out and about. So there's everyone seems to be always on sale. Even the brands that are not normally on sale seem to be
Yeah.
on sale. So it gives you a vibe, and it gives you a bit of a check to go, business is tough. Business is hard to get. Customers are hard to win. And I think what that kind of plays out to me is it's the brands and the businesses, whether it's a founder-led business or whether it's a CEO-led business, whether it's a corporate retail or it's a franchise retail. For me, it's actually thinking a bit more broadly and a bit more strategic about what you need to do and what actually does work, in these particular times. I've got a good story I'll tell you about that soon. But it's thinking a bit more broadly and thinking about what you're actually doing that matters. So, a lot of people get focused on acquiring customers. Let's just get new customers. Let's get more traffic. Let's just get more. The more people we speak to, the more customers we'll get. Well, if that costs you a lot of money, then you're actually not making any money. So it's
Mm.
not profitable to actually go after lots and lots of customers if they don't stick. One of the interesting things, not a lot of businesses, but a lot of businesses that I come into contact or have worked in, is if you don't get a customer to do a second purchase within 30 days, then your lifetime value for that customer kind of ceases or doesn't really exist. And if you can get them to convert again within that 30 days, then they become more sticky. They become a long-term customer. They've got two items, or they've got multiple items that they've bought from you as a business, whether in store or online. I think retailers need to focus a bit more about the customers they actually have
Mm.
and how much money they make out of the customers they actually have. Yes, don't forget about acquisition, but don't be at your own strategic play. And that's what I'm seeing a lot at the moment, particularly with the businesses that I'm talking to, is they're really tracing, and around marketing chasing return on advertising spend, and they're kind of ignoring profit. The return on advertising spend makes you feel good, kind of hides the truth, but the metric that really, really matters to me, and there's a few of them, is marketing efficiency ratio. So your total spending on marketing versus how much you're actually making back. Your contribution margin that you're actually doing. So how much money you're making after the cost of goods has all been taken into consideration. That's that true profitability. And that's where kind of the real picture is. And that's where you kind of pull everything back to actually have a look at that and measure that. And you can measure that, overall, you can measure that to a customer as well. So you can actually start to use that on a dashboard rather than just your other metrics. And then try to scale that, how do you actually scale that, actually trying to kind of do that. So that's where I get into the bits where I really love to do is like, if your offer and your creative and your customer journey is broken, the more you spend, the more you're going to burn faster.
Yeah.
You need to fix those fundamentals first, and then you can kind of scale those. Again, sounding very simple, but there's a lot of work involved in kind of doing that. So it's really starting to people to think a bit more like their CFO thinks.
Yes.
Get some CMOs to think a bit more like the CFO. And then that actually starts bridging the gap between the CFO and the CEO or a founder about what they really need to be doing and how they need to be doing it. Most of the time when I speak to businesses, it's not about spending more. And I learned some valuable lessons about that. It's actually making what you're spending work better for you. Yeah, okay, then you start to find some nuggets and find some wins, but then you can start scaling based on that. So if I've got an opportunity to tell you, but I kind of arose to that through, I suppose, a story I've got. And I did write about it in one of my posts, actually. It was when I was at 40 Winks. And 40 Winks, large-scale franchise retailer, been around for over 40 years, much loved and known brand across Australia. Most people are aware of it. Their parents are aware of it as well. And a really interesting situation to be in from a marketing perspective is that I came into that business. We had come off the year of a record growth, coming off, I suppose, the hangover from COVID. We were still growing. People were still nesting. Had another record year when first year I was there. And then the second year that I was there, it was like everything just wasn't working. Just campaigns were going out. They looked great. It sounded great. The offers seemed to be okay. Just customers weren't responding. A week goes by, a fortnight goes by, a month goes by, 2 months goes by. And I remember having the coffee conversations with basically the guy, the lead e-com who worked with me. And we were walking off to the coffee shop and walking back from the coffee shop, and we were having these same conversations. It was like deja vu every day. It's like, geez, this doesn't look good. Are you feeling what I'm feeling? This doesn't look good. We don't seem to be having the conversation we need to be having here. When do we pull the handle and go, hey, or when is someone going to say, hey, it's not okay, things will turn around? Because that was kind of like the conversation. Oh, it's just a bad week. It's just a bad fortnight. It's just a bad month. Things will kind of remedy themselves. And it didn't. So I suppose I put myself out on a limb a bit and actually got really close with the head of analytics for the business. And in having that relationship with him that I had already, and went, we've got to work this out. We're going to nut this out. Like no one else is going to be nutting this out. We're just feeling more and more pressure from the leadership team and the franchisees who, need to be able to, run their businesses and put their kids through school and make their business and pay their employees. So we scaled everything back. Him and I went through it bit by bit methodically and went, okay, so if we can't spend the money that we have, because in franchise retail, you can't spend what you don't have. So it's a percentage of the revenue coming in from the franchisees. So if the revenue's down, our budget was down, but we're obviously already kind of prescribed that and put that out in the marketplace. So it's like, what's our runway between now and the end? I bet how much we've got to spend, and then where do we actually put that spend, and what do we put that spend on from a marketing perspective? So we pulled everything back to, okay, well, what media does work? How does it work? And what campaign does it actually work on? And what type of offer in that campaign works on? So we stripped it all the way back and went, okay, here's the lead media that's going to push that campaign. What's the actually kind of complementary media that's going to go with that if we can afford it? And then worked out actually a particular campaign didn't need TV. It might only need radio. A particular campaign might only need digital as a lead. And so we actually worked out if we only could do a few things, what would they be do? And we started then to experiment with the offer and actually look at the offers and go, okay, what's our competitors doing at the same time? How do they construct their offer? What are we seeing actually happening with products and services in the category? What do we think is going to get traction with? What's actually worked well in the past? Kind of actually understand what the offer is actually happening with. And we actually tweaked a few campaigns. Campaigns that might be a short campaign, we might have extended them from 3 days to a week. We might have had a fortnight campaign where we actually shrunk them down to a week to actually give a bit more sense of urgency. So we played it through a lot of different levers, whether it's the length, the timing of the campaign, the seasonality of that campaign, and even the offer of that campaign. So if 40 was kind of like the standard, 40% off in the market was the standard, then what do we think is the standard now? Okay, what are we seeing now? So 40 might need to go to 50. So we played with all those different things, and we actually then started to refine the combination of those and how we're going to go to market with those with less budget. So the budget was shrinking, remember? And so then from that perspective, then we actually went, well, let's do some estimations. Let's do some predictability planning here and start to actually understand. So I then presented to the board about some campaigns that we wanted to change and how we wanted to change, not wholesale change everywhere, just targeted campaign change, where we thought we could move the needle, where we actually thought we could move the dial. And then we actually put them in market. Okay, so we think we're going to drive an extra $500,000 of incremental revenue here, which is going to be a profit in everyone's pocket here for the franchisees. And do you give us permission to go and do it? And I'm denied, yes, go and do it. Then we delivered $1 million in incremental. So we've got to win. So then we had another couple of campaigns that were similar to that. So then we tried that again. We think we're going to probably be 900 to 800K incremental on top of what we need to reach from a budgeting and targeting perspective. And then we go and deliver 1.5. So then we started to get some momentum and some traction. And we went from really a year that was going to be going into a negative to actually coming into a positive at the end. And that was all off the back of this really getting into the guts, really getting into the detail, really getting into what worked. And as me as a marketer, I probably haven't I've been in tough situations before where things weren't working, but things kind of turn around and the market kind of corrects itself. This wasn't going to correct unless we corrected it. So it was some valuable lessons that I learned, but then obviously helped build me some of the models that have actually start to work with clients again today. I make them sound simple, but it is simple in explanation, but obviously a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into actually understanding what works and what doesn't work. But then you actually find what works and you scale that up.
Yeah. And as you said, that real world experience of, as you said, I'm sure incredibly stressful at the time and quite nerve wracking to be in that situation. But on reflection, looking back on that, what an incredibly valuable experience to have been able to have gone through and now be able to share that experience with other businesses, because you know what works, you know what doesn't work, and actually perhaps not even you know what works and you know what doesn't work, you know what the process is to figure out what works and what doesn't work and how to actually approach that. And I think as you were talking about that, one of the things that kind of came into my mind was Kodak. And then, the stories of businesses that don't adapt and don't change, and that's obviously a far more extreme example, but it's actually the same principle, isn't it? The principle of, no, it's okay, it's worked before, so we'll just do it again and we'll just keep doing it and hope that it just keeps working, and that part of it is actually the same. But to kind of make that, as I said, I'm sure quite scary but brave decision at the time to go, hang on, no, we've actually got to do something different here, and we can't just keep going on the same tracks and hope isn't a strategy that the market comes back.
Hope is not a strategy, and Kodak is an extreme bank. So I think what we talked about before about a while about retail is, I suppose the net effect of that from when I was at 40 Winks was the compounding effect of it not working each week.
Yeah.
And then another week goes by, and then it becomes a month, and it becomes 2 months, and it becomes 3 months, and you just you blink and you go, well, what are we doing? Like, we can't put the handbrake on. The vehicle's still running. So it was a good pressure cooker situation. It was good to kind of really go back to my roots in marketing and go, what did I learn on my masters? Like, what do I know from all the experience I've been doing? What are all the experiments that I've been doing, many experiments I've been doing along the way? What did I learn when I was at Bunnings when we really didn't measure a lot of stuff? because we opened the doors and we made double-digit growth. But the rainy day helped when Father's Day tanked once, and it was like, well, yeah, these things work. Okay, great, let's pull them out. So, that whole measurement of everything that you do and understanding what you do, you can always, you need to pull out of the drawer sometimes. But yeah, it was a great experience to have. Didn't like it at the time,
I'm
but
sure.
coming out the other end with the benefit of hindsight, but also the results, has certainly given me a great framework and a great story to talk through, but a great framework and a reference point to go back to and say, well, I know this works and I know this process works because I've been up against it with no real other move up my sleeve apart from I need to find out what works and my money's running out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because it goes back to something that I talk to my clients about often, and that's, again, in simplistic terms, but your marketing skills give you a toolkit, and that toolkit enables you to solve business problems. And I feel that sometimes marketers can be divorced from that, or they can be divorced from, we are here to solve business problems, and that marketing can and should generate revenue and be able to attribute that and show how they're involved in that process. And I think it can be easy sometimes. Easy is perhaps the wrong word, but to be divorced from that. So I really liked, you said it in that story, but you said it previously as well, that idea of thinking perhaps a little bit more like a CFO or like a business owner of, we've got a problem here. What is this problem? What are the foundations of this problem? And how do I use my experience and my toolkit to be able to solve that problem?
Yeah. And in reflection on what we just talked about then, and also recapping on that story, I think as marketers, and I've been guilty of it as well from time to time, is that there's an obsession with more. Yeah. We like to be busy doing lots of things. Yeah. But the obsession with more, like more content, more channels, more tactics. But, I suppose that lesson I learned when I was at 40 Winks is that clarity always beats complexity.
Yeah.
Yeah. A simple, sharp, simple offer aimed at the right people, executed well, is often what you need to kind of get that cut through. You don't necessarily have a media problem. You've probably got a mechanics problem, or you've got a conversion problem where customers are not converting. So it's actually really giving that clarity. It's we don't have to be busy doing more. Actually, let's work out what actually we do need to be doing and what we do that works. And that kind of gives you that clarity. So it's a lovely lesson to learn, and it's a lovely thing to kind of work through.
It's kind of the shiny object, isn't it? And I think we all do it in different scenarios, but it's so easy to get distracted by, oh, here's this cool shiny thing over here, maybe we should be doing this. Or you see it with brands who are, I don't know, deeply in the sort of professional services B2B space, but are putting all of their stuff on TikTok, and you sort of think, okay, is that where their customer is? I'm not entirely sure. Like, is that where they should be looking? Or the one that I always remember back in the day when I first got here was when QR codes first came out, and everyone was doing a QR code, and you were, why? Like, is this relevant? But it's so easily, yeah, exactly. But it's so easily done, isn't it? We all kind of get attracted to the new shiny thing.
No, that both of us jumped into the, I suppose, the Barbie and a toy box
totally,
trend that went across the internet. I did a slightly different slant, but we do like to experiment with new things. But I suppose when it comes back to your business and your brand that you're working for, whether it's yours or someone else's, is actually you don't just do things for the sake of doing things. Kind of what I mentioned before. It's not doing more of just doing more. It's actually doing the right things and then working out how you can do more of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the power of knowledge. I thought your example before was really interesting in the business where you said, if we don't get that customer to buy a second product within 30 days, then they're probably never coming back to us. What an incredibly powerful piece of information to know. And would have a huge impact on what you would do with that customer in those 30 days, and whether you'd be pushing offers or whatever you would do within that sort of model. But if you don't know that, if you don't have that piece of data,
Yeah, and look, that's part of the fun of actually getting into businesses. And for me, getting into businesses is actually let me have a look at your transactions, and let me have a look at the size and the frequency of those transactions, and let me go back and look at the last 12 months, maybe the last 2 or 3 years, and actually look at the lifetime value, because they can tell you a huge story about
Mm,
what's actually happening and what's not happening,
mm,
and really a huge profit gain for the business, because there are a bunch of customers that'll be quite loyal, that won't be price sensitive, that do buy multiple items, they don't wait till you're actually on sale. Are you talking to them, and are you talking to them correctly, and are you talking to them at the right frequency, and are you actually talking about what's actually meaningful to them? And then you're not being greedy, but then they're the ones you're going to make the most money out of. Yeah,
mm.
they're the ones that you're not having to convince too much to go and purchase from you again. They're small little nudges psychologically you can actually make, and where they feel good about purchasing with you, rather than actually getting a customer that buys once and you don't see them again,
Yeah.
which they're important, but we've got to think about ways of actually making those
Mm,
one-off and gones come back to be a regular customer, or
yeah.
buy multiple items. But
Yeah.
you look, the other little nugget like that one is I think Australia Post did some report about it. I did a post about it the other day about the average basket size, or the average order value that you see in Australian retail at the moment. It's about $95. It's come down a bit, just obviously cost of
Mm,
living pressures and all that type of stuff. Um, but then probably yourself, being an avid online purchasing person like myself in that space, is that the average free shipping is about $100.
yeah.
And then we're talking about, well, how do we actually get bigger basket sizes? Well, there's an easy way to do that. Just get everyone to spend $10 more. Yeah,
Yeah.
increase the average basket size, which will increase it anyway, because most second items are not $10 from a
Yeah.
retailer to kind of do so. So you might be pushing your basket size up to be $130, where if you're actually only pushing it to just scrape over $100, then from a free shipping incentive of $100. So just little things like
Mm,
that. People go, well, am I giving too much away? Am I making it too hard? Actually, the benefit benefit does outweigh the gain. Sorry, the gains outweigh the benefit there. So they are one of the same thing. If you actually can incentivize people with a little nudge to kind of spend a bit more, they
mm.
typically will. People like to go, well, I get free shipping, great. I'll put one more
Oh, I've
item in
done
my
it
basket.
myself. Like to
Yeah,
save myself $15 on
yeah,
shipping, I've spent $50 on something else that I may or may not
yeah,
didn't may or may not have needed. But it's psychology, isn't
yeah,
it? You're like, oh,
yeah,
I got the free shipping. Go me.
yeah. And look, I did a post yesterday. Actually, it was based on a book that I love called Predictably Irrational, done by
Mm,
Dan Airley. I
yeah.
read that back in my days when I was actually, I think it might have been back at Kmart, and I first started to my first unit of consumer behaviour, and it was one of the prescribed readings. A few chapters were prescribed reading, and then I ended up getting the book and loving the whole book. Um, but he talks about the free, and how
Mm,
free makes you completely irrational. So, like you just said, look, I'm going to put an extra $50 item in my
yeah.
basket
And I know
just to
I've done it,
avoid
and I'm
$15 of shipping. So
yeah.
but it's predictable. So there are some things like that from a consumer behavior, consumer psychology. In that particular book, another book I love was Decoded by Phil. And then you've also got another one that, what's his name? Martin Lindstrom actually got Biology. I mean, they're all about how the brain works and how we
Mm,
make decisions and why we buy the way we do, and what kind of how we actually kind of the stories we tell ourselves to
yeah.
justify how we're purchasing,
Absolutely.
why we do what we do. So, look, I think enough marketers do, but not enough of the marketplace of marketers across a lot of different businesses actually understand the benefits of consumer psychology, and actually
Mm,
using, I suppose, the learnings and the research and the experiments that have been done over the years to actually benefit from them for their organisations. Because I think what I think is a lot of people find it hard to translate those experiments and those examples into how they can apply it for their business. So that's where they need to come to, obviously, experienced marketers like myself and others
nicely
like me,
done.
where we actually have
Yeah.
had these. We've had these books, we've read these books, we understand the
Yeah.
theories, but more importantly, we've had plenty of chances to experiment with them and actually test them and actually see them work. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It comes back to real world application, doesn't it? Like I said before, of you've gone through the storm, you know what to do because you have experienced it, not just a sort of a theoretical, oh
Yeah.
well, if I was in this scenario I would do X, Y, and Z. You know what you would do because you have done it,
Yeah.
and that is always obviously going to be the benefit of experience. But I think even more so in marketing, I think that skill can be overlooked And I think it is sometimes overlooked for a reason which I know plagues marketers across the board, is that a lot of businesses still don't fully understand marketing and what marketing can actually do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where that disconnect can come of, oh, we just need just need content. Let's just have nice pictures on social. Like, that's marketing. Uh, and
Yeah.
that gap, shall we call it, that huge cavernous gap is where a lot of those challenges lie.
Yeah, look, I think it's a perception thing. I mean, perception becomes one of your biggest things in business, and I suppose from a marketing perspective, if you shape the right perception,
Yeah.
then you can get most people to do most things. Yeah. So from a consumer's perspective, if you can create the right perception about your product and your brand, then you can usually get them to think about you and feel about you and act in a particular way that you want. I think it's the same about marketing in general. The perception that people roughly have about marketing can be like, I only do these little things, or they kind of do these things over here, they kind of do those things. And I think marketers, much like myself, need to start, and we do start to actually really have a better seat at the table from that
Yeah.
perspective, is that have different conversations, have
Yeah.
marketers having profitability conversations for a
Absolutely.
start, not
Yeah.
rather than just going, hey, all these vanity metrics, and it's
Yeah.
like, but did we make any sales? Did we make any money? So I think that helps from that perspective, and actually start to change the narrative around what that is. Have conversations where you can hold your own about what's happening in the business, not like how pretty the campaign was, or how creative that campaign is, or how good that messaging is, or how much you like it for yourself, because it's not just yourself that you're selling to obviously your customers. So just changing that narrative will actually help marketing in general. And I suppose the impact of marketing is that we're not in there driving growth and driving profitable growth, then we're not doing our job. It can look great, but it's actually not helping anyone.
Yeah, I actually think that change of language piece is huge. That commerciality style or commercial style of language is such a differentiator, and I've seen it so many times over the years of where that disconnect is coming. It is often because the business is talking one language and the marketer or the marketing department is talking a completely different language, and they might as well be speaking English and German to each other. They're not they're just not communicating effectively.
Yeah.
And I think that also ties in with the earlier point around marketing being a toolkit to solve business problems, because even using that sort of lens, again, it's a more commercial style of lens. Which leads to more commercial language, which leads to a focus on more commercial outcomes, which, as you said, that's what marketing is there for, to drive business growth.
Oh, we go back to the beautiful models that I learned when I did my master's, and anyone that's obviously studied marketing, is that they're business models. They're not marketing models.
Yeah.
They're ways of actually understanding business and actually understanding some methodical ways of actually, building a business or scaling a business or growing a business. So that's why it's under the business and economics section within a university. Yeah, it's not a marketing section of a university. So I think having more business-led conversations, having the right conversations with, I suppose, the founders and C-level management, having financial conversations. But also, I think the other way we can do it as well is actually talk about the metrics that matter. Talk about the metrics that actually matter to a business. And if you're helping do that to a founder, a CFO, a CEO, a CMO, and to other people in the organizations about how can we actually see what's really working the proper way, rather than through other metrics that actually kind of hide those things or don't really give you visibility of those things, then that actually helps as well. Because then really you're having the commercial conversation. And then you're actually going, well, yes, we can do lots of beautiful branding and messaging and creative stuff, as long as it's actually driving a commercial outcome and we're measuring that commercial outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Final question, Damian. It is always the final question here. And that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Very good question. Look, I used to chase perfection. I'm thinking about every campaign had to be flawless. And I think that was part of a bit of a trait of mine, and trying to get everything right. And I work with lots of people and lots of different brands, businesses, and I see that and try to give advice to those people the right way. Don't chase perfection. You can't chase perfection, all right? Well, you can, but you probably will never release a campaign. You'll never do the brand campaign. You'll never do that sales campaign, you'll actually never get this thing across the line. And I think retail kind of taught me that, is that you can never get everything right. You can never get
Yeah.
everything perfect. Yeah. It's got to be close enough or good enough or out there working to come then refine. So yeah, I used to chase perfection, but now I don't. Now I chase momentum, progress that
Mm.
actually drives results. Yeah. So, doing it well enough and good enough. And I don't mean by degrading any of the quality, but getting it out there, getting it working, refining it, actually that momentum, that progress that drives results for me. So look, I've learned that friction kills. It's not
Mm.
big, it's obvious stuff, but it's the little moments of confusion or delay that stop people from buying. And,
Yeah.
and I wish that I understood earlier how important offer mechanics were. One of the things I love about being a retailer is if you don't get your offer right, it doesn't matter how good you are, how pretty it looks, what colors you use, what logos you have with it, what cool video you've got with it. If you don't have a great product, clever, creative, solid targeting, your offer's unclear, it won't convert. So how do you get that offer right? Whether it's a service or whether it's a physical product, whether it's a combination of the two, that's really, I think, you actually won't convert customers. And that'll help you with the conversion on the website. That'll help you conversion when you're at the coalface in the retail store, sales assistant talking to you. That's one thing that I love and I enjoy getting into. I love really pulling it apart and putting it back together. It's rarely one big problem though, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's usually a series of
Yeah.
small things, fix those and the growth comes faster than you can think. But I think it's actually understanding, I suppose, some of those fundamentals. Think of some of the things that we do now. We actually generate leads and we get them to a website, and we want them to do something. Then if where they actually land on that website actually doesn't have all the right cues or the right things in place, then really it's friction point, and then they kind
Mm.
of jump off. Yeah, the same. We do all this work to send all this traffic to a store, and if they have they didn't get greeted, or they didn't get spoken to well, or someone will kind of overlook them, or doing something else, or having a chat amongst themselves, then the friction point is that particular point as well. So it's actually understanding where those points are as well. But I think for me, perfection now I really just chase momentum. The
Mm.
progress is what I want to see, and that actually what drives results, and actually allows people to kind of follow you and enjoy that journey with you, but also get on that same path. They actually start to understand that that's momentum that's going to drive the results, the right momentum. But yeah.
Yeah. There's that quote, isn't there? And I forget who said it, but it's basically that done is better than perfect, because you
Yes.
can never get to perfect. So done is going to win every day of the week over perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so
Mm.
much, Damon. Really enjoyed that. There was so much in there, and to be honest, I could speak to you for hours on that topic, because I think it's so interesting. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience and what you've learned, and the things that have made the difference for you in your own career. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.